Hey, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Raef Granger podcast. I'm Raef Granger, your host, and today I am flying solo. So, my podcast is a hybrid podcast where I talk about business, I talk about networking, I interview entrepreneurs, I interview podcasters, and we talk about gaming and geek culture. I'm blending all of the things that are Raef into one. Little small brief history about me, and today's topic is what I call Raefs Rules, which is a tongue-in-cheek name for, I used to think that there was a book of life when I was a young kid. I remember being around like 12 or 13 or 14, and I thought that there'd be this giant tome, like a thing that would sit on a podium, and it would be this big book, like those big old dictionaries, okay? Remember those folks, the big old paper dictionaries where you look stuff up instead of our phones? And in that would be just the answers to how to live life, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, how to be a good businessman. And so as I go through my coaching, I coach entrepreneurs, I teach master classes, I present to corporations, and I now jokingly within myself call them Raefs Rules, like things to live by kind of thing, as if there were a book on business and life. So that's the tongue-in-cheek part behind that. And so one of the Raefs Rules is techniques on time, okay? Raefs Rule number one is we can't teleport. So that's the rule. There's no such thing as teleportation time or teleport. And here's what I mean. So a lot of times I get asked to teach on time or give techniques on time. And you will find endless resources out there in the business book world on how to do to-do lists and master to-do lists and goal getting and SMART goals. And this is none of those concepts. All right. This is what I have found works for me, some different concepts on time that if it worked for me, my hope is it'll work for you. So first, the story of me on time. I was one of those people that would habitually run about 10 to 15 minutes late. And I started my career as a teacher. Didn't run late there. That was pretty simple. You had to be in your classroom with bells. But my second career was as an attorney. And I can remember being, an attorney and then the attorney that was mentoring me, sometimes we would just always run 10 to 15 minutes late. And I remember we would apologize to the client, and the client sort of accepted it, like, oh, well, you're an attorney, of course you're going to run late. And kind of like how doctors, like, do you really expect you're going to go see your doctor right on the appointed time, or do you kind of expect they're going to run 10 minutes late? Now, to be honest, recently my doctor he runs right on time, but I can remember being in the old days, they always were 15, 20 minutes late, or whoever it may be. This can affect hairstylists, this can affect chiropractors, this can affect dentists, this can affect business people. And so that was me. I began to adopt that style. I would always apologize profusely to the client, and I always felt a little bit like crap, okay? Because, they're hiring me to be a professional, and I can't even show up on time. I have to run 15 minutes late and then beg their forgiveness, or not their forgiveness, but beg for their, indulgence there. And I used to think, hey, their time's just as important as my time. And I would really get upset when they'd go, oh, no, you're really busy. And I'd be like, that's no excuse. I'm really busy. So what? They're a person too. Their time's just as important. And so my point is that even though I felt like crap inside, I couldn't stop running late. The other thing that would happen to me regarding time is how many times I would be in the car or on my phone, and I would need to make an appointment with somebody, but I wasn't sitting at my desk and at my calendar to make the dang appointment. And, this just happened to me with my hairstylist, and she felt awful. We had to make a schedule change. She's like, hey, can you come in 2 weeks? I said, sure. I happened to be at my computer. I put it in my calendar because I don't run, traditionally, I don't run late anymore because of these techniques I'm going to give you. And I show up, and she's like, oh, crud. I did not put you in the book. I now remember that we had this conversation, so I thought that was cool. She owned up to it, and it worked out fine. It didn't jam my schedule up, and I had a lot of grace with it. First of all, she must have apologized 50 times, sent me texts and everything, but that's not the reason why I was okay with it. I was okay with it because I've been her. I am her. And so I had no issue with it. But it did prompt me to think about doing this podcast. And so if you're like me, and if you run habitually late, and by the way, I'll throw this in the show notes. I forgot to grab this before I put the record button on. There is this great cartoon that depicts the experience of knowing it's time to go somewhere and not being able to get up and go do it. All right. So this is going to break that habit. If you're one of those people that I think, or at least it worked for me, always run late and or forget to make appointments at the time that you're making the appointment, then you miss appointments. Here's why it mattered to me. I used to run late. I'd tell my wife, hey, I'm going to be home 5 o'clock. When did I get home? 5:20. Now, what I was doing was I wasn't goofing off. I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't playing a video game. I was working. I was giving that client extra attention. And a lot of people who run late, it's not because they're goofing off or they're scatterbrained. It's because they're trying to be the best at what they want to be. They're trying to give the client the best experience they can give. They're trying to go the extra mile. And so I would habitually run 20 minutes late. She sat me down one time and she's like, I've asked you for years to be home on the time that you're on, that you say you're going to be. She's like, I have a life too. I have appointments that I need to get to. And at that time we had small children, so it's not like she could just leave. She's like, now you're causing me to be late, which I don't like to be. And it's so serious. And trust me, she'd been trying to tell me for years. And I used to say, what's the problem? I'm within the courteous window of 15 to 20 minutes. It's not like I'm 2 hours late. I used to think because I wasn't at the gin mill that made it okay. And I thought the reason was okay. And she finally said to me, if you don't solve this time issue, it's a deal breaker. Well, it floored me. I was like, really? Like, you could possibly want to get a divorce over time, over 20 minutes? And I'm so glad to this day she had the courage to tell me that. Number one, I appreciate so much that I do have a wife that does have the courage to tell me hard things. And number two, I was pissed. Okay, I wasn't just like, okay, oh hey honey. I wasn't the enlightened man that I am now. So I was kind of mad. I thought she was being a little bit ridiculous and a little bit too grandiose. But looking back at that, it was a gift in many ways. Now the gift that it did for me on time is I said, well, I intend to get home on time. What in the heck happens to me? Well, what happens to me was I must have believed in teleportation and didn't realize it. Here's what I mean. I work in the city of Portsmouth, and I would say, oh, I got to be home by 4:30. Oh, yeah, Google Maps says it's 22 minutes. If I leave at 4, plenty of time. I've even got an 8-minute curve. How is it that I'm getting home at 5:05? Well, let me tell you how. Just because the GPS on my phone says 22 minutes, guess what? In the real world of time, I timed myself. It took like 40 minutes. It took that time for me to talk that extra 5 minutes to the client and hang up. It took another 3 minutes to close the office down. It took another 5 minutes to exit the building and say hi to several people, and that was rushing. It took 10 minutes for me to get out of the parking garage. I was floored. If you would have asked me and put a gun to my head, you said, how long does it take you to get out of the parking garage? I would have said 3 minutes. It took 10 by the time I wound around, paid, stood behind 5 cars, etc. And then, of course, I can't fly over the buildings to get home. It took the rest of the time to get home from Portsmouth. So what I've learned was it took me 45 minutes. And I somehow believed that I could be like I Dream of Jeannie, right? I'm old enough to remember that show, right? I Dream of Jeannie. She would blink her eyes and she could teleport to another place. And so somehow that's what I thought, right? That I'd leave to get home by 4:30, had to blink my eyes at 4, and I'd be home. So once I recognized that I had a blind spot as to thinking how long things really took, what I started to do was leave a 1 hour buffer between things. Not a 30-minute buffer or a 15-minute buffer, but a 1 hour. So if I needed to be home by 4, I told myself I needed to be done working by 3. And guess what, folks? I began to get home 15 minutes early. And once I started to, I literally would fight myself in the calendar when I would say, leave work, home by 4. I'm like, it's not going to take me an hour. This is ridiculous. But I forced myself to do it, and I found that that just worked. So my recommendation to you is if you always run late, where are you thinking you have teleportation time? I'll never forget one of my first coaching jobs. I was assisting an attorney in her practice, and her paralegals would schedule her as if she could teleport. Okay, so she'd have a client meeting that would end at. She'd have a client meeting, let's say, that would end at noon, and she'd have a haircut that would begin at 12:15 or something, or just an outside appointment, and I'm like, guys, that she's not going to be done with her meeting at noon. They always run late. You're not giving her any time to collect her things, wind up with the client, and travel to her outside appointment and be rushed. And you're going to ask her 6 questions when she exits the meeting. You have to schedule 1 hour between that ending of that appointment on paper and 1 hour travel time to the next destination. That was in the same city. They fought me tooth and nail on that. The paralegals did, who did the calendar. But the owner, the person I was coaching, loved me. Because guess what, folks? She had the real amount of time it took to wrap up her meeting. She always knew she went long, and she didn't mind it. She wanted to do that. Nobody wants to be that attorney. It's like, 12 o'clock, got to go. Doctor doesn't want to do that. The attorney doesn't want to do that. The hairstylist doesn't want to do that. Okay? So you can't teleport, at least not yet, even though we live in Star Trek times. But that's a rant for another day. No teleportation yet, folks, okay? So, 1 hour travel times, right? You can adjust accordingly from there. But I'm telling you, just start with an hour. The second one, about forgetting or not recording when I make appointments, the only way to solve that is to just make a commitment to yourself, which is the third tip, which is no recording of appointments unless you're sitting at your appointment book. So, excuse me. So if somebody says to you, hey, I got to change my appointment. You're like, oh, hold on, I can't do that now. Set an alert for yourself or whatever. Get to your appointment book, be in front of your calendar, and then make that appointment and do it live. The minute I refused to make appointments on the fly, my whole world became a lot better. Okay, I wasn't missing appointments, and I could say things to the client like, hey, listen, I'm driving, so I'm not able to schedule this right now. If you want to text me your dates of availability, that'd be great. Now you got to remember to look at that text again. But, or even better, I began to use an online scheduler. Like right now I use Calendly. So now when I'm driving or not able to be at my computer to make an appointment, I take my time, set up my Calendly. Okay, that's a topic for another day, I suppose. But in that Calendly link, people can pick appointments that are convenient to my schedule. So that's rule number 2. Don't make appointments on the fly unless you're literally sitting in front of your calendar. Now, the last topic I want to talk about, perhaps, what helped me with time, is I read a document that I call the integrity document. The title of it is called Integrity Without It, Nothing Works, written by Michael Jensen, and you can find this, I'll put the link in the show notes, you can find this on the Harvard Business School website. A really deep read. I found it to be pretty heady stuff, but important stuff. Okay, I've read this thing about 4 or 5 times. The concept is, and again, it's beyond the scope of this podcast, but what I teach in my master classes and what I use as one of the foundational principles is off of this document. But the premise of this is integrity is this concept that to become whole. And when we have integrity, we feel whole. And remember when I described how I would run 10 minutes late, and when my hairstylist was upset that she missed the appointment, she didn't feel whole. She didn't feel complete. She was upset that that happened to me because she wants to give me superior service, as I did as an attorney with my clients. I always felt really crappy when that happened. So when I read that document and I learned about this principle about having integrity means doing what it takes to keep my word. So before giving my word, taking time to pause and say, what is it going to mean for me to be home by 4? What's it going to take? It's going to take a change in my attitude. It's going to take a shift in my perspective. I need to time myself, and I need to put the appropriate time block in my thing. So now when I tell my wife when I can be home, I don't just blithely give her a time. I look around, I look at my calendar, I say, let me check my calendar, I got to think what I've got going on, and I do what it takes before I give my word. That's a shift in principles for me that I never thought about. What is it going to take before I give my word to make that actually happen in reality? The second principle he talks about in what I call the integrity document is how do I make it right if I end up breaking my word? Now, he talks about if you're up to something big, you will inevitably break your word. So then, to become whole, being integrity does not mean never breaking your word. It's going to happen. What it means is, what will it take to get back to what you promised? Okay? Here's an example of that. One of my goals is to increase my revenue. One of my goals is to be on time for my wife. Those are both yeses for me. What happens if 5 minutes to 3, with just another 15 minutes, I got to be home by 4, I need an hour. With just another 15 minutes, I can close a really big deal. Let's say it's going to shift my revenue by 10 grand, which also my wife wants, right? We're together on that. But now it's going to cause me to be late. So let's say I choose to stay with client, extra 15, 20 minutes. Now I'm late. I've broken my word to my wife. What it takes is I have to, when I immediately can say, dear honey, I will be late. So I can let her know so she can make whatever shifts as possible. And then what is it that I'm causing her to do? How can I become whole again? Well, let's say that she now might need an extra pair of hands to get prepared for what she's going to do because she's losing 20 minutes. So now I got to offer to do that. I say to her, hey, honey, I need to break my word. I'm really sorry. What can I do to make it right? Now she may say, well, I was going to drop off our son over here. Now that's something you need to do. Fine. I mean, that's what I need to do. So between those concepts that we just went over, those were the ways that I shifted time management techniques on time for me. And I want to end with one more thing. I had the opportunity to witness the Dave Ramsey organization work. Now, he's not that big out here in the Northeast, unless you just happen to know of him. He's big for two concepts. He's big for and known for the Total Money Makeover, which is his financial advice. But he also has a series of books called, it's one book, but a series of programs called Entree Leader. And Dave is a very interesting guy. I highly recommend you look him up, read his bio, listen to his podcast, listen to what he has to teach. I use him by his first name because I've been out in that organization a bunch of times. Again, I feel like he's my mentor, even though he barely knows me. That's no discredit to him. But, he just runs a great organization. And what I saw within his organization one time was I was on the phone with one of his employees. We're working on a project together. And we were in the mix of it, man. Like, again, if we could just spend another 20 minutes, we were going to shift mountains, right? And he says, hey, Raef, I need to go. It's, it's 5 minutes to 4 and I've got a meeting at 4. And I was floored, right? I had not seen that happen before. This was back when I was used to running 15 minutes late to everything. And I'm like, this is just a dinky phone appointment. Can't he be late to his next phone appointment? And no, he couldn't. And why should he be? I realized. But by watching an organization actually stick to the clock, to leave time at the end of the phone meeting, to then schedule the next phone meeting, and to actually keep, I started to do that. Oh my gosh, guys, my world changed. I was less stressed. I had less anxiety. I started to make my appointments. I was able to keep my word. People were impressed. And what I realized is how many of us are used to being in corporate meetings, it's 4 o'clock, and we really think they're going to start at that time, or somebody's not going to be 10 minutes late. So when does that mean? What does that mean to me? Well, I'm not going to wait around at 4. 4 o'clock comes, I'm waiting for a phone call. That person doesn't call me. What do? I pick up the phone or I answer an email. I'm on to the next project. Now, both of our schedules are off by 15 minutes, so on and so forth. So by actually sticking to your appointment times really makes the rest of the world run so smoothly. And in your own life, it'll run so smoothly, it'll be amazing. So I would urge you to, when looking at your appointment times, actually keeping your appointment times, even if that means interrupting what's going on in the previous appointment to give you that appropriate time to get to the next appointment. Simply just saying, hey, listen, I know we're really onto something big right now, but in order for me to make my next appointment, I have to end this now. And it is... I just couldn't believe how much 10 minutes made a difference by keeping on schedule. how much it made a difference in my own life selfishly, in my work life, and in the other person's schedule. And when I saw that organization stick to that, and I saw that work on a mass schedule of like 85 employees, that's all how they operated. That's what's great about Dave, is he's able to teach culture like almost no other that I've seen. And that's just indoctrinated into them. And that's a whole nother podcast too, of the great things that we can learn from culture. But yeah, keeping those appointment times, it was a big shift. So, a bit of a Raef Rules rant. I hope this podcast helps you on time. Thank you for listening. If you're so inclined and you like to see the back end of this and see the video behind this, you can support me over on the Patreon page, my Patreon page. You can just go to patreon.com if you're not familiar with that. It's a place where you can support artists, podcasters, and designers, things like that. And just search for the Raef Granger podcast. And I'd love it if you support the show. And there's different tiers and different levels. But in essence, at certain tier levels, you can see the video behind this. And, of course, see if there's any other, sometimes there's interviews I do that go extra long. I'll throw the extra bonus content up there and stuff like that. So, again, thanks very much for listening. And until next time, see you later. Go time.